The Pittsburgh Steelers are starting to put the pieces together. Pittsburgh selected Kenny Pickett in the first round of the 2022 NFL Draft, and after a sluggish start, Pickett is starting to play better and come up big in the clutch. The Steelers are 6-2 since their bye, and Pickett is a big reason for that. Pittsburgh has a ton of young talent on its roster, and it doesn't seem like it'll take very long for the Steelers to get back to the top of the AFC after the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger last January. The Steelers signed Mitch Trubisky to a 2-year contract in the offseason before selecting Kenny Pickett in the first round of the draft. Pittsburgh actually wanted Pickett to sit for a bit, and Mitch Trubisky ended up starting the first 4 weeks of the season. He wasn't amazing by any stretch. 653 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 59.5 completion percentage. Pittsburgh was 1-3 over the span, and finally in the third quarter in week 4, he was benched for Kenny Pickett. You could say Pickett had a pretty rough beginning to his career. The good news, all 13 of his passes were caught. The bad news is 3 of them were caught by the other team. His first ever pass in the pros was picked. He did throw for 120 yards and rushed for 2 touchdowns though. The Steelers decided to give him a shot and named Kenny Pickett the starter for week 5 at Buffalo. Pickett started in the next 4 games before the Steelers' week 9 bye, and he certainly had his issues. Pittsburgh won one of those games, and Pickett really struggled. He completed 67.1% of his passes for 842 yards, only 2 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. That's just how it is with rookies, but out of the bye, Pickett played better and really did protect the ball. The Steelers won 3 of 4, and Pickett started showing some improvement. He didn't throw a single interception over the stretch, and he completed 61.7% of his throws for 835 yards and 2 touchdowns. In week 14, Pickett did suffer a concussion early that caused him to miss week 15. Kenny Pickett has really shown that he has the potential to be a pretty good NFL quarterback in the last 2 weeks. He didn't exactly blow up the stat sheet. I mean, in his last 2 games combined, Pickett has completed 62.1% of his passes for 412 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. What did matter though is that Pickett showed a lot of poise and the ability to be clutch down the stretch in big moments. In week 16, the Steelers hosted the Raiders. Las Vegas led 10-3 with 10 minutes remaining, and the Steelers hit a field goal soon after to cut it to 10-6. Very late, Kenny Pickett led a 10-play, 76-yard drive that was capped off by a 14-yard George Pickens touchdown to win the game. He was just super clutch. Pickett ended up doing it again on Sunday on the road versus Baltimore. Almost the exact same situation actually. Pittsburgh trailed 13-6 with less than 10 minutes remaining in the game and hit a field goal soon after that cut it to 13-9. Pickett took the Steelers 80 yards on 11 plays. He found Najee Harris for a 10-yard touchdown pass to win the game, and I'll tell you what, it was a beautiful throw. Pickett has obviously had his rookie pains, as everyone does, but his play deep in close games over the last 2 weeks has given some reason to be excited for the future of Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett was an interesting draft prospect. We truly had never seen anything like him. Joe Burrow gets talked about a lot as someone who only had one truly great year in college, and that's true, but it's nothing compared to Pickett. Burrow was significantly better than Pickett his redshirt junior year, and Pickett, he was just never that guy at Pitt. Before his COVID season, his best body of work was his sophomore year when he threw for less than 2,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Nothing crazy at all, but he came into that extra year and dominated. Pitt was really good too, 11-2, and ended up winning the ACC championship. Kenny Pickett was the real story. He went from an afterthought to a potential top pick at the 2022 NFL Draft on a dime. He passed for 4,300 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions while completing 67.2% of his passes. Pickett ended up finishing 3rd in Heisman voting behind Bryce Young and Aiden Hutchinson. He was good, but I think there were still a lot of questions about him. There wasn't too much secondary talent in the ACC that season, and that definitely helped Pickett break out. It also helped that Pickett was throwing to Jordan Addison, who had nearly 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns on 100 catches. He won the Fred Biletnikoff Award, given to the best wide receiver in college football. Pickett had the size and the physical tools to be a pro, but I think his technique needed some more work. His pro comp was prime Andy Dalton, and I think that's actually a very fair comparison. Pickett was a projected first-round pick, and he ended up being the only quarterback to go day 1 of the draft. The Pittsburgh Steelers have so much young talent on their roster outside of Kenny Pickett. A big thing with rookie quarterbacks is putting the pieces around them to succeed, and I think Pittsburgh already has most of those pieces. In the second round, after taking Pickett in the first, the Steelers drafted George Pickens. That's just looking like a home run selection in my opinion. Pickens is one of those guys that passes the eye test. Even if the numbers aren't popping off the page, you can watch him and know that Pickens is a baller. There's no doubt in my mind that he's a first-round pick if he doesn't tear his ACL his junior year at Georgia. His stock dropped a bit, and the Steelers took advantage of his slip. Through his first 16 games, Pickens has 49 receptions for 729 yards and 3 touchdowns. Pittsburgh has 2 other guys with over 700 yards, Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth. Deontay is a clear number 1. He inked a 2-year extension in the offseason worth over $36 million. Johnson had over 1,100 yards in 2021 and has gone for over 800 off 84 catches this season. He's only 26 years old, and there's still plenty of great play to come out of him in Pittsburgh. Freiermuth has already groomed into a very good tight end. He had almost 500 yards and 7 touchdowns as a rookie and has over 700 this season. Najee Harris is a bell cow on the ground for the Steelers. He was a Pittsburgh first rounder in 2021 and he had 1,200 yards as a rookie and ended up making the Pro Bowl. Najee has 950 yards this season. I feel like every season the Pittsburgh Steelers have outperformed their expectations, and I honestly think that's 100% due to Mike Tomlin. If you would have told me that Pittsburgh would actually have a shot of making the postseason in Week 18 at the beginning of the year, I would have called you crazy. Now, there are a few things that would need to happen for the Steelers to make the postseason. Pittsburgh has to beat Cleveland for one. The Bills need to defeat the 8-8 Patriots, and the Jets need to beat the 8-8 Dolphins. Regardless of if Pittsburgh actually makes the playoffs, it's been an amazing turnaround this year. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing record in his 15-year head coaching career, an NFL record, and if Pittsburgh wins versus the Browns, it'll be 16. Kenny Pickett got better, and the Steelers have figured things out. Once 3-7, the Steelers may finish the year 9-8 and in the playoffs. That's just a true testament to how good Mike Tomlin is as a coach. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really love Kenny Pickett as a prospect coming out of Pitt, because there was just a lot of uncertainty there. It's always a pretty dangerous game taking a player that only had one good year. Not to mention, Pickett was a 5th year that turned 24 before his rookie season even started, and was okay at best in his first 4 years at Pitt. If it weren't for the pandemic and an extra year of eligibility, he'd probably be a grad assistant somewhere or selling insurance right now. But everything seemed to work out for him. A lot of young quarterbacks' development and success is purely based on the team that takes them. And the Steelers are just such a good organization. And I also just can't say enough good things about Mike Tomlin as a coach. Ben Roethlisberger retired, and it was the perfect storm that the top quarterback in the class was the kid playing in the same stadium for the past 5 years. Remember, the Steelers didn't draft Dan Marino after he lit it up at Pitt in the early 80s, and they surely regretted that for a long time. Pittsburgh didn't want to make that same mistake twice. I've liked Pickett to a degree this season. I do think he'll be the best quarterback from the 2022 class, but I think that's more of it being a weak quarterback draft than Pickett really being that guy. Regardless, it looks like the Steelers have their guy. Kenny Pickett is the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the next few years are going to be completely based around his development and ability to be a franchise quarterback.